With today's strong focus on fake news, it is now more important than ever to have the skills to determine the legitimacy of a source and to reach a conclusion with as little bias as possible. This video will describe the process that I use when considering a topic or position to study. The first thing I do is build a general overview of a topic by quickly looking up sources to discover the sides and arguments being made. Seek out the most extreme sides using all resources available. Do this until the arguments are repeatedly coming up enough that you feel comfortable you have a full picture of the topic. Make a mental note of the various sides or arguments that exist. For example, let's use the topic of vaccines and whether or not your child should get them. Spend a couple minutes familiarizing yourself with the arguments being made for and against. Purposely look for the extremes on all sides. Here are the arguments I found being made. 1. Vaccines are dangerous and can cause autism among other health risks. And 2. There are no risks involved with vaccines. In this case, our question is binary and can only be answered with a yes or no, so there are only two sides to the topic. More complex topics often involve numerous extremes or arguments. Next, use reputable sources to fact-check the arguments and develop your own view of the topic. This usually ends up falling somewhere between the extreme sides, but not always. It can help to use extreme sources to confirm opposing viewpoints. These sources are useless at confirming their own positions because of the inherent bias, so only use extreme sources to verify arguments from the opposing side. The idea being that if a biased source confirms an argument from an opposing side, it's a pretty good indicator that it could be true. Also, be sure to look up impartial, middle-of-the-road sources. These sources should not have any connection to the topic that could indicate bias. To ensure an accurate source, always check the citation to see where the information came from. Make sure the citations lead to reputable sites, if not using a first-hand source. Follow the citations to the primary sources where sides and arguments are made from. My general rule of thumb is to find at least two separate primary sources to confirm an argument. Of course, the more primary sources you find, the better. So back to the example, I now want to fact-check the claims I found. A popular claim is that vaccines can cause autism, so let's start with this. But first, we must determine how this can be verified. Since we are looking for a link between autism and vaccines, an acceptable primary source would be a peer-reviewed research paper from a well-thought-out experiment or study. The citations of several sources led me to a few neutral research studies, all of which are credible primary sources for the argument. I found that vaccines are not linked to autism, so next I want to know if there are any other risks. By the way, I found out that the myth of vaccines being linked to autism comes from a poorly done study of only 12 people, so the entire myth comes from a flawed study with an insufficient sample size. The lead researcher had also been bribed by a lawyer looking for a link between autism and vaccines. The peer review process later verified this to be false, but the rumor had already taken off. I found that studies show the side effects of vaccines to be minor: itchiness, redness, bruising, headache, fever, etc., and maybe the flu. After the rest of the claims have been fact-checked, I am left with the remaining claims. Now all I have to do is weigh the pros and cons and make an informed decision on whether or not I should vaccinate my child, which is the third and final step. Finally, analyze all the information to arrive at your conclusion. In our example, this should be pretty straightforward. We found out there are some risks to vaccines, but they also come with the advantage that deadly diseases are prevented. Studies show that vaccines are very effective at preventing the horrific diseases they are designed to prevent. In my opinion, I think the advantages greatly outweigh the disadvantages. The toughest part for most people is figuring out what metric to use. For example, if you're looking at the health of the economy, you might think of analyzing the total debt. But this is a poor comparison because debt can be used as an investment, meaning a country heavily in debt could actually be doing very well economically. In fact, the US has the highest debt in the world, although it's certainly not the poorest country. So maybe you'd think of analyzing GDP, or gross domestic product. This tells you how much revenue passes through a country per year. But a larger country is almost always going to have a higher GDP simply because it has more people. A small country like Luxembourg has a relatively small GDP, but it's also known as one of the richest countries in the world, so you'll want to factor in population by using the GDP per capita as a metric, or even better, the GDP based on purchasing power parity per capita. The GDP PPP is the GDP corrected for purchasing power and inflation. This is even better because the cost of living is not constant across the world. To figure out the appropriate metric to use, you'll want to determine what variables are involved and how to correct for them. If this does not come naturally to you, try researching what metric the relevant expert uses. It can be very helpful to read an expert analysis to see how they tackle the problem. Again, here's the overview for the process I use when researching a topic. 1. Construct an overview of the topic by quickly researching various mainstream and extreme sources. 2. Fact-check claims using reputable primary sources. These include things like peer-reviewed and scholarly sources, government documents and data, surveys, polls, interviews, or wherever else the claims are originally coming from. And 3. Analyze data using an appropriate metric. Use the steps in this video and you will find the process of researching to be much quicker and simpler. We all have roughly the same information available to us. The trick is in how we perceive and use this information. This requires perspective and empathy, but with practice it can become easier. I wish you luck in avoiding fake news. If you learned something from this video, please subscribe for more, and have a mindful day.